What's up guys, Mark back here with another Sony A6300 video, and on this video I'm going to be testing out the rolling shutter. So basically what I did is I took three stands that I had here in the studio and I just sort of lined them up side by side so that when I started to shift them back and forth I could actually see the angle of the jello effect. So I set my camera up on a tripod and I'm just going to start swinging it back and forth, and I'm going to basically be doing three tests for each setting. Now there are about 7 different video settings in the Sony A6300 and I wanted to test them all because I know that higher frame rates are going to produce different results. So what I do is I go just really fast back and forth to test the jello effect, you know, just waving it back and forth. And then after that, I do an actual slow, controlled, regular style pan, a pan that most people are actually going to be using. And then I go and I just do whip pans from corner to corner in the room. I go from far left to far right. And what I did is I used it in every single mode, video mode that the Sony A6300 had. And it, like I said, it's got about 7. It's got the 4K. I believe there's 4 settings in there. And then it's also got the HD, which is not in Super 35. So I test them all, and I'll have all that information on the screen as we go. So as I said, I do 3 different tests with each of the video modes. The first one, I just sort of whip the camera left and right, back and forth to see what kind of jello effect we're actually getting. Most people, the lay person, is not even going to notice that this is happening. But I do know that us people that work with videographers, we actually want to see what the capabilities are. And then what I did in the second part of each test is I just slow pan from left to right in a very controlled way, just like most people would actually do. The third part of the test that I do is I just do very fast whip pans, all the way from the left, all the way to the right. And freeze it. So as you can see right here, we do have a significant jello effect. The angle, I was able to calculate it at about a 20-degree angle. That is pretty significant. It's not the best, I would say, but it is about average for most other cameras. A lot of people were talking about how just horrendous that the jello effect was with the A6300, and I didn't find it to be any worse than any other camera that I've used that didn't have a global shutter. Okay, this is the second test. This is the XAVC 4K 30 frames per second 60 megabit. And the jello effect is still there, and it is still pretty significant. But here's a controlled pan from left to right. This is a pan that most people would do. So again, I find that in real-world applications, slow panning or regular panning per se is going to be perfectly fine with this camera. But yeah, the jello effect is pretty bad. But like I said, it's no worse than any other digital DSLR that I've ever seen. This is the third setting that's in the camera. It is the XAVCS 4K 24p 100 megabits per second. So one thing to note here is that I did notice that when I switched to the 24p 100 megabits per second, the angle was only about a 12-degree shift as opposed to a 20-degree with the 30p. In the grander scheme of things, it's not a huge difference, but every little bit counts. Last but not least, in the XAVCS 4K setting, we're at 24p, 60 megabits per second. I measured this tilt, the angle on this clip, and it was in fact a 12-degree angle as well. So just about the same as the other one. So it seems to do just a smidge better, about an 8-degree difference better in the 24p as compared to the 30p. So you're not going to notice the jello effect as much if you go with the 24p setting. So we move on to the XAVCS HD codec, 60p, 50 megabits per second. And when I tested this one, of course we're at 60p, so we've got a lot more information in between frames. But I'm honestly, at the height of the pan, I'm only getting about a 2-degree tilt. So, I mean, honestly, the higher you go up in frames per second, you're obviously going to get less of that effect. So just something to note. Moving right along to the X-AVCS HD30P 50 megabits per second codec. At the height of the pan, I was only getting about a 2 to 3 degree shift in the angle. So it almost seems like if you're using a codec with less information, if you're not using the 100 megabits per second codecs, it seems like if there's less information there, obviously your image quality will go down, but you do get less of the jello effect. Moving on to the X-AVCS HD24P 50 megabits codec, what we've got is at the height of the pan, we've got a 5 degree tilt in the angle, which is roughly about half of the 100 megabits per second codec. So if you plan on doing this type of technique, it might be better for you to use the lower bitrate codec. Granted, you will lose a little bit of image quality, but you know, you make compromises depending on your needs. Alright, moving on to the X-AVCS HD 120p 100 megabit per second codec. I was getting about a 2 degree angle on these as well. Now the smear is not as bad when you pan from left to right, but the angle is still only about a 2 degree angle at the height of the pan. And that was pretty consistent with the next codec that I tried out, which was the X-AVCS HD 120p 60 megabit per second codec. I was getting about a 2 degree angle. So we're not talking about anything super significant, but it is something to kind of be aware of. If the jello effect is a problem for you, or if you plan on doing any sort of very, very fast movements, it might be either better for you to either use a lower bitrate codec or increase the overall frame rate of your footage. So guys, what do I ultimately think? Honestly, until they get rid of rolling shutter in these cameras, it's always going to be an issue. They're going to have to include a global shutter in these cameras in order for it not to be an issue anymore. Realistically though, no one's ever going to use their camera in this fashion. When have you ever picked up your camera and slung it back and forth in a violent manner over and over and over again? It just doesn't happen. Very rarely are you ever faced with a situation where this might happen. Maybe some passing cars, maybe if you're in a car and you're driving really fast and you got some telephone poles kind of shifting off to the side, but other than that, just know the limitations of the gear that you're using. So there you have it, and there you go, guys. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and like the video. Share it on the internet with your friends and family and colleagues, and also, if you like this kind of content, consider yourself a subscriber and hit that subscribe button for more videos just like this. At any rate, guys, thanks again for stopping here. I'm your host, Mark Puckett. I'll see you guys again in the next one.